The last thing Marcus Webb bought at RadioShack was a clock radio. That was 1987. He was 11 years old, and his mother had driven him 40 minutes to the Brampton Hills Strip Mall in northern Ohio because he had saved up $19 and wanted something that felt like the future. He remembers standing in the aisle for a long time. He remembers the smell of the place. Plastic and solder and something underneath those things that he could never name. Something that reminded him, even then, of basements. Of spaces where things get left and forgotten. He bought the clock radio. It worked fine for 3 weeks. Then it started receiving a station that didn't exist. He didn't know that yet in 1987. He wouldn't understand it until last October, when he walked back into a Radio Shack for the first time in 37 years. He wasn't alone. None of them knew each other before that Saturday morning. October the 4th. A Radio Shack location in Brampton Hills, Ohio, that had no right to still be open. The chain had collapsed years ago. Most locations had been gutted, repurposed, turned into nail salons and insurance offices and the kind of small businesses that survive for 2 years and then disappear quietly. This one was open. The sign was lit. The windows were clean. There was a handwritten note on the door that said everything must go in red marker, the letters too even to have been written quickly. Marcus Webb walked in at 9:47 in the morning because he needed a specific type of coaxial cable and had already tried 2 hardware stores. Denise Okafor walked in at 9:51 because she had seen the sign from the road and thought she might find a cheap learning toy for her daughter. Paul Strickland walked in at 9:55 because he was a collector. Old electronics, vintage components, the kind of things that Radio Shack used to stock in the back aisles in bins that nobody touched for years. He had driven 2 hours from Columbus specifically because a post on a collector's forum had mentioned this store, this address, this date. The post had been deleted by the time he arrived. He had written down the address on a physical piece of paper. He is grateful for that now. He is grateful for very little else from that morning. The man behind the counter was thin and very still. He had a name tag that said Glenn in the same red letters as the sign on the door. He did not look up when any of them entered. He appeared to be reading something. Paul noticed later that the surface in front of Glenn was completely bare. There was nothing to read. If you are watching this video right now, do yourself a favor. Look up from your screen for just a moment. Check the room you are in. Check the corners. Not because of what is in them. Because of what might have just moved out of them. We will continue. Marcus found his cable in the 3rd aisle. It was exactly the right specification, still in the original packaging, priced at $2.49. He remembers feeling pleased about that. He remembers thinking this was going to be a quick trip. He was standing at the end of the aisle, about to turn back toward the counter, when he heard it. A voice. Mechanical. Coming from the shelf to his left. Turned. It was a learning toy. The kind that had been popular in the early 90s. Plastic casing in primary colors, a small speaker grill on the front, 4 large buttons along the bottom. The kind of toy designed to teach children letters and numbers and basic words through repetition and a cheerful synthesized voice. It was not plugged in. There were no batteries visible in the compartment on the back, which was hanging open. The voice said, Marcus. He stood very still. The voice said, you already know what this is. He set the coaxial cable down on the shelf. He did not do this consciously. His hands made the decision before his mind caught up. The toy said, you heard it in 1987. You heard it every night for 3 weeks and then you threw the radio in the trash and told your mother it stopped working. The store was quiet around him. He could hear the fluorescent lights. He could hear his own breathing. The toy said, it didn't stop working, Marcus. You stopped listening. He picked it up. He does not know why. He will tell you himself that there was no good reason to pick it up, that every functioning instinct he possessed was telling him to put distance between himself and that shelf. But he picked it up and he held it and he stood there in the 3rd aisle of a Radio Shack that had no business being open while the toy in his hands spoke to him in a voice that was cheerful and hollow and patient the way only something that has never needed to sleep can be patient. It said, the station is still broadcasting. It said, it has been waiting for you to tune back in. It said, you are already tuned in, Marcus. You have been since you walked through that door. He put it down. He walked to the end of the aisle. He did not walk back toward the exit. He has thought about that decision every single day since October the 4th, and he cannot explain it. He can only say that the exit did not feel like an option in that moment. Not in the way that someone was stopping him. In the way that a word sometimes refuses to come, that a door sometimes feels like a wall, that a part of your own mind quietly closes off a route without telling the rest of you why. He turned left instead of right. He went deeper into the store. Denise Okafor found the toy in the second aisle. She was not looking for anything specific. Her daughter was 4 years old and curious about everything, and Denise had a habit of picking up educational toys when she found them cheaply. She was browsing without urgency, reading the faces of old packages, enjoying the particular nostalgia of a store that seemed to have stopped receiving new inventory sometime around 2003. The toy was on the middle shelf. A robotic assistant, roughly the size and shape of a large thermos, with a rounded head and 2 small arms that rested flat against its sides. Its eyes were circular LED panels, currently dark. It was priced at $9.99 with a yellow sticker on the base. She picked it up because it looked like something her daughter would like. The eyes came on. Not the dim activation glow of a device waking from sleep mode. Both LEDs burned a hard white that did not flicker, did not warm up, did not behave the way light behaves when it is produced by a circuit responding to a power source. It was the light of something that was already awake and had been waiting for the right person to make contact. Denise nearly dropped it. She tightened her grip instead. The robot said, in a voice that was calm and measured and somehow specific to her in a way she could not have articulated, "Your daughter sent you here." Denise said, "What?" The robot said, "Not from the future. From somewhere closer than that. Somewhere that does not have a clean name in any language you speak." She said, "This is a toy." It said, "Yes. That is one of the things it is." She asked it what the other things were. It did not answer that question. Instead it turned its head, slowly, on a neck mechanism that made no sound at all, and it looked toward the back of the store. It said, "She wants you to go back there." Denise said, "My daughter is at home." The robot said, "The version of her that is at home with your sister, yes. That version is fine. That version is watching a cartoon about a dog and eating crackers from a red bowl." Denise knew the bowl. She had packed it that morning. It was red with a white rim, and her daughter called it the cracker bowl and refused to eat from any other container. She had not told anyone about that bowl. She had not mentioned it to her sister. She had not posted about it anywhere. The robot said, "The other version wants to show you something." It turned its head back to face her. It said, "She has been waiting a long time for you to find the right store." Denise set the robot down on the shelf. She did not leave. She does not know why. She knows that she should have left. She is a practical woman, a surgical nurse, someone whose professional life is built entirely around the discipline of rational response to frightening situations. She manages panic in other people for a living. She could not manage it in herself in that aisle. She followed the direction the robot had indicated. She went toward the back of the store. Paul Strickland was already there. He had come in looking for old stock. Vintage components. The kind of thing that ends up in the back of stores like this in cardboard boxes that nobody has opened in a decade. He had a list. He had a system. He was not a man who frightened easily, and he was not a man who believed in things that could not be measured. He had been standing in the back room of the store for 6 minutes before the others arrived, and in those 6 minutes his list of things he believed in had become significantly shorter. The back room was not large. Metal shelving units on 3 walls, cardboard boxes in various states of collapse, a single overhead fixture that buzzed on a frequency that Paul, who had studied electrical engineering, could not identify as standard. The floor was concrete. The air was cold in a way that had nothing to do with ventilation. On the center shelf, at eye level, was a radio receiver. Not old stock. Not vintage. The equipment was contemporary, professional grade, the kind of thing used in signal monitoring and frequency analysis. It had no price tag. It had no packaging. It appeared to have been placed there recently and deliberately, the way you place something you want a specific person to find. It was active. The display showed a frequency that Paul did not recognize. Outside the standard broadcast bands. Outside the ranges allocated to emergency services, aviation, maritime, amateur operation. Outside every range he could identify from his training and his decade of collecting. The signal was strong. He put on the headphones that were resting on the shelf beside it, because of course there were headphones, and he listened. What he heard was not static. It was not a voice. It was not music or code or any signal format he could classify. It was sound that had been recorded in a place that does not share physical laws with the place you are reading this from. He knows this is not a sentence that can be verified. He knows it sounds like the statement of someone whose grip on rational thought has loosened. He says it anyway because it is the only description that is accurate. He was still wearing the headphones when Marcus and Denise came through the door. They looked at each other the way people look at each other when they have separately arrived at the same terrible conclusion and are not yet sure whether to be relieved or more frightened that someone else is there. Paul took the headphones off. He said, "How long have you been in the store?" Marcus said, "About 15 minutes. Denise said, "Less than that." Paul said, "The signal on this receiver is not from here." Marcus said, "Define here." Paul said, "I mean it is not from this time." The room was quiet. Denise said, "The robot told me my daughter sent me here." Nobody responded to that for a long moment. Then Paul said, "The signal keeps repeating a specific pattern. I have been listening for 6 minutes. The same sequence. Over and over. Like something trying to get a message through a medium it was not designed to travel through." Marcus said, "What is the message?" Paul said, "I think it is a warning." Marcus said, "About what?" Paul looked at them both. He looked at the receiver. He looked at the door they had come through, which was the only door in or out of the back room. He said, "About this door. About this day. About the 3 of us being in this room at the same time." Denise said, "Someone knew we were going to be here." Paul said, "Something new. I do not think it is someone." The light above them buzzed. The frequency shifted. And from the front of the store, from the direction of the counter where Glenn had been standing without anything to read, came a sound that none of them could identify and all of them recognized. The sound of a toy. Learning. Repeating. Patient. Saying 3 names. In the order they had walked through the door. They left. All 3 of them, together, through the back room door and down the center aisle and out through the front without looking at the counter. None of them looked at the counter. Paul says he does not know if Glenn was still there. He made a choice not to find out and he considers that choice the single best decision he has made in his adult life. The parking lot was ordinary. Ohio sky in October, the particular gray of a morning that cannot decide whether to rain. Their cars were where they had left them. The strip mall around the RadioShack was unchanged. The RadioShack sign had been turned off. Not during the time they were inside. It had not buzzed out or flickered. It was simply off, as though it had never been on, as though the store had never been open, as though the handwritten note about everything must go had been a thing they had all imagined independently and simultaneously. There was no note on the door. Denise called her sister from the parking lot. Her daughter was fine. Watching a cartoon about a dog. The red bowl was on the coffee table. She did not tell her sister any of what had happened. She does not know how she would have finished that sentence. Paul still has the frequency written down. He has cross-referenced it against every database he can access and found nothing. He has contacted 3 separate engineers with backgrounds in signal analysis. All 3 told him the frequency should not be receivable on standard equipment. One of them asked where he had gotten the reading. He said he found it in a store. She said, "What kind of store?" He said, "The kind that sells things you do not realize you are buying." She did not respond to that. Marcus went home and went to his basement and found a box he had not opened since his mother died in 2011. Inside the box was a clock radio. Black plastic housing, red LED numerals, a dial along the top for tuning. He turned it on. It went directly to the station. No searching. No scan. Directly to a frequency broadcasting a voice that was calm and hollow and patient. The voice said, "Welcome back." He stood in his basement for a long time. Then he went upstairs, made coffee, sat at his kitchen table, and began writing down everything he remembered from that morning in the RadioShack. He sent the account to 3 people he trusted. One of them sent it to us. We have verified the address. We have confirmed that no RadioShack franchise has been registered at that location since 2017. The building's current commercial tenant, according to county records, is a tax preparation service that operates from February through April. The building was vacant in October. The sign was not supposed to be lit. Glenn was not supposed to be there. None of what happened in those aisles was supposed to happen. And yet Marcus Webb still cannot bring himself to throw away the clock radio. He says he is afraid of what it would mean if the station kept broadcasting without a receiver. He says he is more afraid of what it would mean if it stopped. If this story found you, it was not by accident. The things that reach you in the dark always have a reason. If you are still watching, if the room around you still feels like yours, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow so you do not miss what we find next. Some of what we find next is already looking for you.